Welcome to the first POWTS chat of 2024. I think quite a bit of the state is getting ready for some snow today. I know it's snowing here in Wausau a little bit. Somewhere between 1 and 24 inches, I think, is what they forecasted. So I guess we'll all wait and see what happens with that. But anyway, let's get into the presentation. We've put out a request for some questions to help us sort of prepare, answers that you guys want to know. And we had a bunch of those come in, so we prepared some slides, some topics to talk about those. So I'm going to be going through some of the topics that we had come in. One of them was, how do I access ESLA to view credentials? So there's a couple different ways that we look at credentials right now. And I know that the ESLA, we keep saying it's new, it's been around several years, but we're still working out some of the issues with it, that eventually all the licenses will be in the ESLA system. But right now, they're not all in there. Basically, the ones that we deal with in the POWTS, the one that is in there would be the soil tester license. So the way to look that up is that you go into the public lookup on our website, and let's see if I can I got two screens here, new computer here, so working with it. But you search up here for credentials, and the public lookup button, I think it's a little cut off up here, but way on the upper corner up here on our title bar on the DSPS website, public lookup, it's like in the upper right next to help and login. But you click on that and you bring up your credentials. You'll have the drop down box, you'll find credentials, and then application type that we'll be looking for. Drop down box will highlight trades credential. Then you can type in your last name. This is Katie's license here, so you can type in your last name. These ones with the asterisks are required, so you need to have a trades credential, a soil profession, and the credential is the soil tester. You can fill in other information if you want to, it'll narrow it down, but sometimes putting too many things in there, you may miss it. So sort of less is better. Trades credential, soil tester, just your last name. Unless you've got a very common one like Smith, you may have to scroll through a lot of, but anyway, you type that in, it shows up right down here at the bottom, the name, the credential, that it's active. And then you can also click on here on the view. So once you do this and hit search, the line items will come up on the bottom. You can find the one you're looking for, and then you can click on view. And once you click on that view, that'll bring up your license. And so this information will come up in here. It'll have the name, all the different information, active, trades credential, customer ID, things like that. But these are the important ones on here. Well, a few important things is that one, it'll list how many continuing education hours are still needed and when your license expires. So Katie's license actually expires this year. So she'll be looking at that. And the note at the top, this is something we put on. This isn't on the website, but renewal notices and invoices will appear in your account about 60 days in advance of expiration. So about end of April, Katie's going to see a notice that's going to pop up in her account here saying that her license expires. Now, those that have been around for quite some time, remember that we used to have notices that were mailed to us or we get an email. That doesn't occur anymore. So you have to stay on top, check your license, find out when it expires, make sure that you're staying up on it. You're not going to get a postcard in the mail saying your license is up for renewal. You're going to have to come in here and check to make sure that your license is up to date. So stay on top of that and make sure that you're checking that. But again, the soil license is the only one that's in ESLA right now. And down at the bottom here, you can also check list of your last list of classes that you've received credit for. So a list, the class, here's commercial septic design, says what the date was on it, continuing education status applied, and how many credit hours were applied to that. So if you did take a class and you're wondering, hey, have I got credit for that yet or not? Especially if you're, I'm still missing an hour or two and I don't know, did I get credit for that class? You can come in here and check and verify whether you got credit for your classes, how many hours you still need, and when your license expires. So that's the way to look and find for your CST license.
Matt, before you switch the slide, may I say one more thing?
Sure.
So remember how when I said logging in the chat that your credential or ID number might be different if you're a young gun, you got a new number.
Yep.
So specifically with the CST license, you have the credential number and the customer ID number. When you
Mhm.
go to apply for continuing education credits, so entering your number into the chat, the customer ID number is the one that you want to enter into anything that you're seeking credit for people that have separate credential numbers like I do, because I received my license within the 2020s, basically.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but that customer number is what's going to be useful for the next step. If you have another license, that customer number is going to be what we used to call the old license number. So if we go in here and look, this is the other way to find them, is if we go into other trades credentials for now, you can go into the Wisconsin license credential search. And that's up there at the top. You can see where the email or the web address is for that. So you can go in here. This has all the different licenses. So this and everything from a beautician license to a boxing promoter to all the different things in here. But what we're looking at is the trades credential license. That's what we're looking for. So you can do a license search if you know that, or an advanced search. I typically use the advanced search because that's one that it's broader, that allows you to have more parameters. If you don't know, if you know what your license number is, you can do the credential license search, just type that in there. But down here we can select license type, license status. Always make sure that it says any, because you don't want just active or expired. This will bring up even old licenses. Last business name that you can put in here. And then we got to check that you're not a robot, and a lot of times it'll pop up and ask you to identify motorcycles or crosswalks or something weird like that. But search for the trades credential, type the name in here, and when you go to the next slide, what this will do is it'll bring up all the other credentials. So POWTS inspector, POWTS maintainer, plumber license, all those licenses will pop up in here. In any other associated things such as the electrical, building inspector, things like that. Any of those would be what we call the older license or traditional ones. Eventually, these will be brought into the ESLA system. We've been waiting for that. It has not happened yet, but so for right now, we have two spots we have to look. So if we go in here, this license in here shows that Katie has a POWTS inspector license, expiration date again this summer, and it shows how many hours are required to renew. A little bit different format than ESLA, but shows you have 24 hours to renew, and you've accumulated 46, so there is 0 still needed, and it shows what the date is that they're needed by. Some licenses require the credits to be applied maybe a couple months. Usually, I think it's 3 months prior to the expiration date of the license. This one has to have them by the end of the license. But anyway, this is how you can find your credits. So there's two different ways. Soil tester license is through the ESLA public lookup. Other trades credentials go through the trades credential search. Can also be found on our DSPS website. You can type that in there either by the credential number or the way we did it, just by the last name, and then you can get your credentials that way. So, and then I'll just as a new note down here that the name of the credential is in sort of this blue or black rather. It's currently valid. If it's blue, that means renewal application's been sent. In red, that means it's expired. So it won't say that it's expired, but that's sort of the color key here for the type of license that shows up. But anyway, that's how you can get to your licenses and check what you've got going on. So the next question that we had come in is, when a plumber installs a conventional cell utilizing stone and pipe, is it required by code to glue these joints of the perforated pipe? Well, that is a general plumbing issue. So we have to go to the general plumbing section of the code and take a look at that. So for joining pipe, there are 3 options according to SPS 3D 4.40. And so the one I just looked at was plastic pipe. But I mean, there's each different pipe has different requirements, whether you're putting together cast iron or ABS or PVC, CPVC. But the plastic pipes, the PVC, CPVC requirements, slightly different code section under 84.40, 3D4.40, but they have the same requirements. So the ones I listed here was for PVC. I mean, it's the same as ABS, but it shows that there are three different options under here. Now, first one is a mechanical joint, and the mechanical joint is listed. It's not a push-on joint, but a mechanical joint is through ASTM D3212, which handles flexible, watertight, elastomeric seals. So basically like the Ferncos. So that's what they're talking about for a mechanical joint, not a friction fit joint, but a mechanical joint. So you put the rubber Fernco on, these bands anchor it down. So that would be one option. The next option would be a solvent cemented joint. So we've seen this, usually you got the purple primer and then you've got your cement. So that would be the second one, is to cement the joint. The third option for plastic would be a threaded joint. That has to be schedule 80 or heavier. So, the gray schedule 80s, they can be fit together just with a threaded joint. So the option on those, as you see, mechanical joint, mechanical joint, solvent, or threaded joint, there is not a pressure fit. So they should be gluing the pipes together out there in a drain field. Now, I know people have said, what's the big deal? Because, we're not under pressure there. It's not watertight because it's full of holes anyway. The pipe that's going through the gravel distribution cell. Well, we could get possibly some frost action or some movement there that could pull pipe apart. And we don't want to have a gap or something in that pipe where we're not getting, effluent out to the end of the drain field. So they still should be, using one of the required options for, attaching pipe to pipe. Pretty much what they're going to be doing out there is a solvent cemented joint. So those are the three options of the 3D4.40 for joining plastic pipe. That's what they need to be using. Next question we have, what's required for different scenarios related to floor drains? So this is a real big question because all floor drains are not created equal, but I'll try to cover, the big ones of what's going on here. So you can sort of see, the picture in the background there. I know it's way in the background, but you can see that we do have a floor drain here. But you can sort of look around, what's going on in this kind of facility here. There's some equipment, a little lawn tractor and stuff here. It looks like some kind of a repair shop. And it's got equipment here. So there's probably some oils and grease and things like that going out there. So it's important to find out, what potentially can go to that floor drain. So the deal with the floor drains is that, once we collect that wastewater, there's a discharge point. And basically we're going to go to two different things, is that either it's going to go into a POWTS, or if it's not going into a POWTS, then it's technically regulated by the WDNR. So the DNR discharge, handles any kind of surface discharges. So, what are our options here? Well, we have residential garages, that can go to a POWTS, or if it's daylighting, discharging to grade, that's handled by the DNR. So I've talked to the DNR and they say clear water discharges, they will not regulate, but if there's any source of contamination, they want to regulate it. So that's something that's up to the DNR, for us to decide. And I know that's a change or an issue that we've had with a lot of these. It's not what we've done in the past. But if it's going into a POWTS, I mean, we can do that. Really, we don't want, snow melt and stuff into a POWTS. But, we consider residential garages as not being a significant source of oil, grease, gasoline, things like that, because it's just the parking of a vehicle, just, possibly snow melt or rain dripping off. However, we get to things like commercial garages, shops, or vehicle storage. Because we have a potential for grease, gasoline, other, chemical stuff like that going into the drain. Those we cannot do to a soil-based system. They can go to a POWTS yet, but it'd have to be a holding tank type of POWTS. We can't have that those kind of contaminants going into a septic system. I didn't really discuss it much on here, but EPA has some rules about that. If we do a subsurface discharge of those kind of contaminants, it's considered an injection well. And there's a whole host of requirements and regulations for that. And basically, that's a no-no. We're not allowed to do that. So any kind of commercial garage or shop, vehicle storage, or we're going to have potential repair of vehicles or grease and oils, gasolines, things like that, has to go to a holding tank. Now, because it's a holding tank and it has this commercial industrial wastewater, we need to have a DNR concurrence letter with that. Or the option would be is if there's no other waste going into it, domestic wastewater, the DNR could solely regulate that as their own tank for industrial wastewater. So if it's commingled, we could do a holding tank with the DNR concurrence, or the DNR would issue a whatever certification they want for that tank. If we have commercial industrial facilities, we could possibly do a POWTS with DNR concurrence, and that depends on the waste stream. So again, if it's a commercial garage or something where we have, petroleum products, oil, gasoline, things like that, it's going to be only a holding tank. But if you have a floor drain that's a commercial industrial facility, such as a manufacturing plant or something like that, where they have possibly some water there, a small vegetable processing plant, and they're washing vegetables. Or I know we've had an instance where they were doing some processing of plants, lavender, other things like that. If the water that's going into it, the wastewater is not contaminated with petroleum products, and we believe that the wastewater is not going to be a detriment to an in-ground system, with DNR concurrence, the DNR may say, yep, you can go into a soil-based system, or the DNR will go back up to the one up above and say it's concurrence only to a holding tank. So the DNR will make that call. So if we have in a commercial industrial facility, we're generating an industrial wastewater, then we're going to have to get DNR concurrence to find out, exactly what's going into it, whether that can be something that can be handled through a soil-based system, or whether we're going to have to go to a holding tank. And then the last one that we've had that have popped up more and more is mostly the kennels, but it could be stables or non-egg animals. I don't know if you're raising guinea pigs or what's going on, but the DNR has basically said that wastewater can go into a POWTS, a soil-based POWTS. But the big thing is we need the addition of hair filters, and there are some commercial ones out there. That'll basically sort of like a lint filter on laundromat things, is that basically it takes the hair out. So if they're washing animals or spraying down common areas, keeping a kennel run or something clean, there's a lot of animal hair, and we've got to make sure that we trap that or take that out. So the floor drains, there's various different scenarios with them, and I'm sure there'll always be something new that'll pop up that we haven't covered. But if you're running into these, especially with the commercial ones, let us know. We're going to have to talk to the DNR, get some input from them on what's exactly being generated and whether it can or cannot go into a soil-based POWTS, or whether it goes to a holding tank.
So Matt, there was a question that came up in the chat, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that. So regarding kennels and things, it still requires DNR concurrence because it is a non-domestic wastewater, but
Correct.
the POWTS with the addition of hair filters is there to state that that's typically what they would require as a part of their concurrence, or?
Yeah, they have that on their website, is that they ask for that. I don't know if it actually comes out as part of their concurrence, but we've been looking at that internally, just trying to identify, that there is a hair filter. That seems to be the biggest detriment to these failing early, is that they're just a lot of hair. If animals shed, dogs shed, a lot of hair. Especially a lot of these kennels, they're not only just a kennel, but usually they're doing some kind of grooming or something associated with them, which may even be outside animals, and the hair is a substantial portion of the wastewater, and that seems to be what prematurely fails these the most is the hair that does it. So
Thank you.
next question is with this mild winter, and I should have put that in quotes because it's changing as of today. But with this mild winter, we've had some topics come up. How do we know when the ground is not suitable for installation? Um, we've had a lot of systems being put in, recently. I mean, up until I know a week or two ago. I mean, we had weather in the 40s a couple weeks ago. Through December, people were still putting in systems, still able to plow. I know I grabbed some soil samples, I think the week between Christmas, New Year's, and yeah, it was nice and warm out. Worms are up in the topsoil. Sort of strange for this time of year, but the weather was fine. So, what does the code say about it? Well, we used to have, I mean, some things in the code more about, winter. We still have a few things in there. 383.45, parent 2 states frozen soil. So, POWTS treatment dispersal components, um, basically the soil ones, cannot be installed if the soil is frozen at or below the infiltrative surface. Now, years ago, we did not have the below the infiltrative surface. We had some people that were trying to beat the weather that would go out and plow a mound and put some sand down and tarp it and come back and finish them at a later time. And you can do that. I mean, if you've got the good weather and you get out there and plow and get some sand down, put 6 inches of sand and tarp it, that's not a problem. The problem is that it was freezing rock solid. They would come out, put more sand on top of it, cap it off, and then the homeowners would move in January and try to put it into service. And it's the middle of the mound was froze and it wasn't working. It's leaking out, caused weird biomat formation in there in the middle of the sand. It was really problematic. So several years ago, we did add that the soil can't be frozen and or below the infiltrative surface of the component. So we can't have any part of that system being froze if you're constructing it. The other one, next one is parent 3 deals with snow cover. Is that if you are doing something out there, snow cover has to be removed. And that's for post treatment dispersal components consisting in part of in situ soil. So even if you're doing a conventional system, we don't want you digging through a foot of snow and then having that snow fall into the system, into the trench or whatever. So I mean, even if you're digging that, you'd have to remove the snow cover. Or I guess in theory, you could have a light snow cover on top, and then it's still soil can still be unfroze below, but you'd have to remove that snow cover. And then parent 4 deals with moisture. This still applies. Winter or not, is that the moisture content for in situ soil, we can't roll into a 1/4 inch wire. So whether it's frozen or not, we still can't have any part of a dispersal component of in situ. And this also includes conventional systems, as that if you're digging them out and the soil's so wet, we don't want that smearing. How do you know if you're digging a conventional if you're plowing, you should be able to see it on the ground surface. If you're digging a conventional, you can see it. If you're smearing the sidewalls of the trench that you're digging or smearing the bottom, check it. But 1/4 inch wire, you basically take a handful of soil and start rolling it between your hands. And if it rolls into a wire, fine. If it sort of crumbles away, fine. That then you're better. I mean, if it's a 1/4 inch wire or more, then it's too wet. And what we're trying to get at is the soil, what they call the plastic limit of soil. Is the soil moldable? Now, obviously, a sandy soils are going to be hard to form a wire at any time, where the heavier textured soils are going to more likely want to form a wire with low moisture content. And that's just, again, where the plastic limit of the soil is, we don't want to have smearing, because once we do that, we're not going to be able to get water. It's going to seal it off. We're not going to have water movement into that soil. But those are sort of the different things that deal with frozen soil. Now, we did have another question that came in late. I did not prepare a slide for that, but relates somewhat to this is, what do we have for soil testing in the winter? What are the requirements for that? And we used to have some language in the code that said, I think between November 15th and whatever it was, March 15th, we could not do winter soil testing. We've taken that out and allow it for if conditions are suitable. But the thing you have to realize is that, frozen soil, we can't texture. It's hard to deal with. I know people were digging pits and thawing them out with charcoal or wood fire with a piece of tin on top of it. Depending on what you're looking at, that may be problematic. If you're worried about redox features and things like that, you can actually bake the soil or oxidize it where we won't be able to see those kind of colors. And then in addition, because of the low light levels in the middle of winter, it's difficult for us to evaluate. I know years ago, I've seen some sites that everybody looked at, thought were fine. You get there in the middle of summer and we got giant bullseye models looking at us because the low light conditions, the more redder hues cover up the red redox features that can't be seen. So um, there's nothing hard and fast that says you can't do winter soil testing, but be aware, poor light conditions, low light levels, snow blindness, frozen soils. There's a lot of issues with doing winter soil testing, and your confidence interval goes way down in the winter. So just be aware of that. The next question is, when is a new soil test required as opposed to just one boring? So we've had some questions come up that, we may have a soil test or something out there. Do we need a new soil test or can we just do a boring? Well, the centers upon the old perk test, the old EH115s. So I got my little zombie out here. The EH115s just don't seem to die. With the last code change, perk tests are no longer valid. So treat them as though they don't exist. So if you don't have anything, and that's what a perk test is, EH115, it's nothing. So don't even pretend it's not even there. So if you're doing any modification or a tank replacement, you need to have at least one boring to verify the separation to your system, or separation distance for that system. So if we're replacing a tank, but we have a drain field, we need to have one boring out there by that drain field to verify that it meets the separation distance. The reason we got rid of the EH115 as a perk test is that they did a good job at telling you percolation rates or loading rates, but they did not do a good job at determining separation distance to groundwater. So that's why we need to have at least one out there to verify our separation distance. The system can remain in effect as long as it meets code, which is it meets a separation distance. So we don't need a full soil test, but we need one boring to verify that it meets a separation, that they did not miss something in 1978 when they did their perk test, that it does meet separation. However, if you're doing a replacement of the drain field or a recore, so if you're modifying the cell, then we're going to need 3 pits or borings out there. So we're going to need a new soil test for that location of that area. It's not just do we meet separation. We're going to need a new soil test to verify that drain field can be either record or it can be replaced in that area. Then we're going to need new soil tests. So one, if we're just checking separation distance, new soil tests, because we don't have one, they can't build a new system if we don't have any soils. Again, EH115 doesn't exist, so they need a new soil test for that one. Next question is, what's the minimum amount of cover that needs to be over the drain line from the tank to the D box? Well, SPS 383.45 parent 7 has minimum depth for piping here. And this is the top of the effluent lines and force mains. So basically all of our piping shall be covered by a minimum of 12 inches of soil. So that's what the requirement is. We got to have at least 12 inches of cover, and that's for insulation. I know years ago, everybody comes up with new ingenious ways. We had some depth of berries, but we had somebody that ingenious said that I'm not going to bury my force main. I'm going to leave it on top of the ground. And we said, you can't do that. Where's it say in the code? Well, now this is where it says it in the code. So 383.45 parent 7 minimum depth for basically all piping has to be at least 12 inches of soil cover. Next question is, can a frost tooth be utilized for plowing a mound, or is it strictly forbidden? This is another reoccurring topic that keeps coming back over and over. And we've had a lot of internal discussions about, what what is a plow, what's the intent of it. Um, so if you look at page 18 of the mound component manual, it lists in there moldboard or chisel plow and talks about, moldboard, what to be careful of. It does recommend, most of the farmers have gotten away from moldboard plow because if it is slightly moist, moldboard will smear easier than a chisel plow. So a moldboard is not ideal. I don't think hardly anybody uses them anymore. They're sort of hard to find. Um, Most people have gone to a chisel plow. And it's more recommended on fine textures, just again, because a fine textured soil is going to hold more moisture. It's going to be easier to smear. So it's better to have the chisel plow. So the picture on the right shows a chisel tooth. It's got sort of that spring steel. But then if you notice on the front of it, it's got this piece of metal. It's sort of hard from the angle to see there, but it's turned, it's twisted a little bit. So it's like a mini moldboard. It's not as big, but it's got a slight twist to it. So it cuts and it sort of turns that soil a little bit. And that's the goal of what we're trying to do in plowing is we're trying to not just cut a groove in the sod, but we're to cut and turn the soil a bit and facilitate assimilation of water into the natural landscape. Now, some other chisel plows will have like a little a foot on the bottom, like a little like an arrowhead or a spade shape on the bottom, which helps to sort of it's more of a subsoiler to help cut and lift the soil a little bit, break up any kind of compaction. Um, and some people have taken like these spring teeth and welded up like a bracket that they'll put on their bucket of their backhoe or their high hoe or the excavator, and they'll be able to drag it along, and it'll have two or maybe three of these spring teeth on it to plow, and that's fine. But the ultimate result is to cut and turn the soil and break up that sod. And so, can other methods be used? Well, yes, maybe. It all depends on the result. So, if somebody wants to go out there with a shovel and by hand cut and turn the soil over, break that sod, cut and turn it, reorient it, and not just flip it over. We don't want to totally invert it because all we did is we took the sod from the top and put it on the bottom. We want to sort of cut and tip that up so that we get the water to move vertically. So, yeah, they can do that. Frost tooth, I'm not in favor of a frost tooth for a couple of reasons. Is that one, they're not a plowing implement. They're not made for plowing. They're made for cutting a groove or breaking through frost. In addition, that frost tooth usually it's a singular. It's not a frost teeth. It's a frost tooth, and that requires multiple passes over the same piece of ground to keep cutting grooves into it. So even if they add like the little wings or whatever on it to sort of fluff the soil or cut and turn it, the problem is that instead of an implement like this that may have 6 chisel teeth or something across the bottom, that frost tooth you're dragging that same one back and forth over and over. Minimize compaction, number of passes. The simple thing is component manual says moldboard or chisel. Rototill or frost tooth, it says are not acceptable in a component manual. So use an implement that's meant for plowing, not one for breaking up chunks of frost in the soil. So that's my answer. Next question is, how does one properly complete a soil test or review one? This is mostly geared to how to review a soil test, but I think it also goes in with completion. I mean, we could spend an hour or two on this, but I just wanted to go through just make sure that all the information is filled out correctly. Property owner, mailing address, location. We do have nearest road on here, but if you know the address of the site, that's helpful to actually put the address on it, or you can put it on the plot plan, but it's helpful to put it on here that if it's not their mailing address, they're buying a new property or whatever, and if it's got an address now, put the fire number, say it's 1234, whatever, lonely lane or whatever out here, put the address on so we can find it. It helps us. The county and parcel ID should be filled out, the number of bedrooms, what floodplain elevation, things like that, general comments in here, I think you're fine. But as a reviewer at the county, you should sign it in here and date it once you've reviewed it for complete information. Now, you're not necessarily going out in the field and verifying the information in the field, but you are certifying that you looked it over and that it looks complete, that you've got the right name and the parcel ID and the right number of bedrooms and things like that. Further down in here, when you start looking at the profile itself, make sure that they have everything is completely filled out across here. Horizon depth, everything is filled out across, including the loading rates. And that's one of the other thing you're checking at, is to make sure the loading rates are accurate for the texture and the structure that are listed here. Check the elevations and depth limiting factor based on the information you see here, whether there's redox or what's going on. Check your limiting factor. But that's what you're basically checking on the soil test, or reviewing it, or completing it. Make sure that that information is complete. So again, general information. Pits and borings have information filled out for each horizon and correct nomenclature. They're not putting down words that don't make sense or abbreviations that don't make sense. Also checking for some common things that, especially as a reviewer or as a submitter, don't split the A horizon. So it's typically the dark horizons 3-3 or darker. So Tamara 3-3, Tamara 3-2, stuff like that. Because then we're trying to achieve a A+4. So if you have an A horizon that is, like, let's say 12 inches, and the bottom, let's say 4, has redox in it, by all means split that out and say this has redox, but don't just split the A horizon into 2 so you can meet A+4. A horizon is an A horizon, dark texture or dark colors, not just the first horizon. Verify loading rates. They can be more restrictive than the table allows. If the soil tester says, hey, I think there's some weak compaction or planiness or something, and I want to back it off from 0.5 down to 0.4, they can do that. It can't be any higher than what the table allows. Also, make sure you sign the soil test, or that soil test is signed. And then verify the stuff on the plot plan. And there's a whole host of things there, slopes, contours, setbacks, pit locations, high water marks, floodplains, benchmarks, elevations, etc. But to go through to make sure that that looks correct, is that they did their proper work on there. And also that it's neat and legible, that we can see what's going on, and it's not full of erasures or light ink, or been photocopied 20 times and we can't see, or on top of a dark airfoil that obliterates things. So make sure that that looks good, and we can get the information we need off of it. Pre-treatment units, what credit is given? Well, this has been sort of a new thing that has crept up here. We have things like the passive pre-treatments, like the Elgins and the Geomats. They receive 12 inches of vertical credit with the 12 inches ASTM C33 sand underneath their engineered unit. So the Elgin, the mattress, or the Geomat with the 12 inches of sand is their unit, or is their product. They also receive the higher loading rate at the sand soil interface. So they get the base of the second column, the higher loading rates. And that's where, they get the downsizing. So they get the 12-inch vertical credit and they get the downsizing, but they get 12 inches of credit with 12 inches of sand. So it's sort of a wash that way. The active treatments, the ATUs, the inoculated systems that have the inoculants in them, the fixed films, etc., all the other systems that are approved for use in the state do allow the use of what we call the column 2 loading rates in table 3-344-2. So that's the higher loading rates. However, we've been looking at the products, and all of them with their NSF testing, to get the vertical separation credit, they only get the separation credit if they were using a tertiary, or so instead of secondary for the ATU, a third treatment of UV or chlorination. And so for right now, none are approved for use in Wisconsin as of now. And I'm talking about the UV or the chlorination. So we have ATUs and other systems that are out there that are approved, but they get the downsizing credit for column 2, the higher loading rate, but they don't get the vertical separation credit because they require a UV or chlorination. And as of right now, we don't have any of those products approved for use in the state. So just be aware of that. It's something that, I guess we weren't quite aware of either. We look into more things, and Josh has been doing a great job with the product reviews and sorting these out, making sure we're using the products according to the way that not only were they approved, but also that they were originally tested. So making sure that we're using them in the manner that we've got results for.
Hey, Matt, there was a question that was entered into the chat regarding this topic. So the question specifically was, what was the effective date of this code change? There's multiple parts to it. So this is not specifically a code change. It's a change within the product approvals, and Josh was on the call. And if he'd like to speak to that, that would be wonderful. But I'm going to go through the question a little bit further here. So the additional part to it was, how will this impact Geomat or Elgin products? Effectively, there's no change, as there is still, in actuality, 36 inches of separation between unit and limiting factor because of that 12 inches of system sand. There's still 36 inches from where the effluent is entering. And on that, the component manuals for Geomat and Elgin are still valid. So this change, I guess, is specifically more so regarding systems that only had 24 inches of separation between effluent meeting the soil and down it and to the limiting factor. So Josh, do you have anything additional to add about that?
Yeah, there really wasn't a big change per se. We're literally, as we're diving into all the test data, the only way manufacturers are meeting their fecal reduction was through utilizing UV. We're finding out that the manufacturers weren't actually adding anything. And then to top it off, we don't have any UV or chlorinators even approved in Wisconsin at this point. So they are listed as tier 3, which gives them the ability to get that fecal reduction, but they have to add another device in order to meet the standard. If anybody has any questions about that, they can sure reach out to me by phone or by email, and I can walk them through what it is at the end of the day. So
yeah, and I think this is something that we just want everybody to be aware of going forward here. I don't think that we're going to be knocking on people's doors that had these installed before and requiring retrofitting of it. Unfortunately, we're still talking about this internally, but we just want everybody to be aware of going forward for sure. We have to make sure that we're not going to be approving these credits or approving them with the vertical separation credit. And the county should not be approving them also. And just be aware of that when you're looking to design them for the vertical separation credit. We will not be granting that going forward here. What do we do with the old ones? I can't answer that right now. But going forward, we can't do it because they're not approved for that. So we just want everybody to be aware of that at this time. So if we have more information or more changes to come along, we'll let you know. But definitely going forward, we can't continue to approve these because they do not get vertical separation without the UV or chlorination.
Question. This is Barry at Zalke County. What about the ones that we have issued permits for but yet to be installed?
This is Josh. I would answer that. They need to explain how they're going to meet the fecal reduction if they haven't been installed yet. Otherwise, it's going to be a non-code compliant system. If there's another question in the chat too, if there's anybody that has these systems, the question in the chat was, if they've got to replace a tank, what happens? Well, if they don't have the correct separation distance, they're going to have to, update the system as well, because they have to meet the standard of the code.
Yeah, they're going to have to meet the code. Currently we can't continue as a system that's substandard to be allowed to be in use. So I know this is going to be a problem for us to work through, but if we know about them, we can't continue to allow them to go in from this point forward. The ones that are already out there that have been approved and in the ground, I doubt we're going to go back after them, but we can't continue to allow them if we know that they don't meet the criteria.
So we need to pull those permits out of the drawer and have the plumbers reapply?
Correct.
Yep.
So again, what's the effective date that we're going to work off of?
Well, the effective date would have been most of the product approvals through their previous cycle, so it could be as far back as 10 years ago. There is an effluent standard that they have to meet. So if you look at the tier 3, it literally said their fecal has to be less than or equal to 10 to the 4th.
So I don't know how many systems you're going to have that have approved plans that are more than 10 years old. So most of the approved plans are valid for 2 years unless they've been renewing them periodically. but basically something that has not yet been installed, most likely they're going to have to bring up to compliance.
Thanks for the heads up.
Not a problem. It's always fun learning stuff out. So finding new things that you didn't know. But next question we have, when is a grease interceptor required? Well, a very generic answer for that is under 382.34 parent 5, grease and oil treatment. All plumbing installations for occupancies other than dwelling units or other than residential, where grease, fats, oils, or similar waste products or cooking food are introduced into the drain system, need to have a grease trap, basically, or grease and oil treatment. So grease separator, grease trap. So basically, a lot of different things. If it's any kind of kitchen or commercial establishment that produces food, or it could be an industrial wastewater, but again, then we'd be getting involved with the DNR, letting them make that call. But basically, if they're producing food, fats, oils, and greases, waste products or cooking, they're going to need a grease trap. So it doesn't specify exactly what kind of food production it is, but we have to take a look at that to find out, what they're producing in there. But obviously something like this, they got a grease or fryers or a full kitchen, they're going to need to have a grease trap, grease interceptor. Question is, should I stop submitting, or, and the other side of this would be approving plans where manuals or products are expired? Yeah, if the product approval has expired, that product is no longer approved for use in Wisconsin. So, we have different products that come and go. They don't seek product approval, or the product approval has changed. So we have to make sure, and this sort of ties in what we talked about with our different units for pre-treatment. We have to make sure we're looking at the product approval and what it requires. And I guess we're doing a better job at looking to make sure that they're meeting those requirements the way they were submitted. But yeah, you got to look at the product approval, and if it's expired, can't be using it anymore. Now, once you obtain the permit, if a permit's been issued, even if the product approval expires, once that permit's been issued, that permit is valid for that 2-year lifespan. If at time they want to renew it or whatever, the product approval is expired, then they can't renew. Then they'd have to get, do a revision and use a different product because that product's no longer approved. But let staff know if a situation arises. Sometimes we had a product approval here, a certain tank that was actually sort of mislabeled. It's approved, but it's approved as something else. And sometimes a product approval inadvertently lapses. Manufacturer doesn't realize one of their products, especially the tank guys, one of their tanks, may have inadvertently lapsed. And, we'll work with the manufacturer to get those approvals up to date, or we'll let you know that, yeah, they let it lapse. They're no longer going to be selling or marketing that product, and it's no longer valid. So let us know if you find a product that's, we can't, it's hard for us to keep track of everything that's out there also, but let us know if a situation arises. But no, you should not be using a product approval for anything expired. And that includes component manuals. We've had different component manuals that have expired, and once they expire, they're expired. Let us know. I know this was sort of centered on the question about the easy flows, and we're working on getting that renewed up here. Josh is working on that. You'll probably get a statement out to say that they're in the process, they're valid, but we haven't got the final product out yet.
Another note on that, though, Easy Flow is approved as a gravel alternative, so they don't technically even need a component manual. They do a component, so it's easier for everybody to navigate using that mound setting. So again, the Easy Flow mound manual would not be required because that product is a gravel alternative.
Yep. The next question is, when a repair is made to a mound such as new stone and laterals, does a new state number get assigned? So a repair is a minor fix, such as a broken pipe or a fitting. So the county can choose, if they have in their ordinance, issue a repair permit. But if you're doing a mound recore or major replacement of laterals, That is not a repair. So that would that's basically it's a new drain field that would require a new plan approval. So if the county doesn't have age status, I'd have to come back to the state for review, and it would require a new sanitary permit number. So yeah, no, if it's a minor repair, then the county could issue a repair permit, and the county should. We should be knowing if stuff is being repaired or there's been modifications out there to a system or what's going on. If we have repeated things, we can sort of flag that. But a mound recore, major replacement of laterals or pipe and gravel, that's basically a new system, and that would require a new sanitary permit number. Are there efforts to preserve and improve the Wisconsin Fund, and what can be done about that? Well, the Wisconsin Fund, as it's commonly known, it's actually I forget what the long title is, but it's the grant and rehabilitation replacement for septic systems or whatever the long term is for it. But it's described in 387. So as of now, Wisconsin Fund is scheduled to end on June 30th of 2025. But this is the last effective cycle, because of the way the funding is that 2023 systems are going to be funded in 2024. 2024 systems will not be funded until fall of 2025, but the program ends in June 30th. There won't be any money there. So as it stands right now, systems now for 2024 aren't going to be eligible unless something happens. So what is that needs to happen? Well, funding is part of the department's biennial budget and the state's biennial budget, and they're relying on legislature and the governor approval. So the continuation of Wisconsin is basically up to them. They give us, they handle what, or tell us what we can and cannot spend, even though it is, quote, in the code as there. If we don't have them, they'll give, or not given the legislative authority to spend money, there's no funding for it. So even though it's in the books, it's not funded. So the important thing to remember is the staff, we implement the laws and codes as passed by legislature and signed off by the governor within the budgetary confines. So we're only allowed to do what we're given authority to do and given the money to do. So I guess where this boils down is that if there is, if you feel strongly about the program, you'll need to contact the people that control the purse strings, frankly. So if you find that this is something important to you, either through privately yourself or organizations that you're a member of, to keep asking for support of the Wisconsin Fund, that's up to you. I mean, obviously the department supports it, but again, we're only allowed to do what we're given authority to do or given the resources. So I guess that's where it stands. We'll do what we're allowed to do, and if it gets re-upped for another 2 years in the next budget, so be it. But that's sort of beyond our control. Are there any proposed POWTS code changes in the works? Well, simple is no. But code updates have been on about a 6-year interval, and sort of jokingly, like earthquakes, I guess we're due. We're not scheduled to be open to do a code package right now, but we're getting close on the 6-year interval, so we're about due. But there's a lot of different programs, a lot of different requirements. Our code writers can only work on so many projects at one time, so I have not heard that POWTS is ready to be opened. So we'll let you know if it does, and then we'll have to form an advisory committee and go through that whole, I mean, it's a legal process. It's not just us making changes. General Plumbing recently went through the code process with a few sections related to POWTS. We've talked about those before at POWTS Chat, some of the things in General Plumbing that affected us. So there's been a few little minor things related to that. We did recently update component manuals, but they're outside the code. They're listed in or referred to in the code, but component manuals, those we can update. And that's why it was done that way, is to allow us to update component manuals without having to go through the official code process. That's a long drawn out process that can take 2 to 3 years to complete. Also, we're looking currently at the appendix. Appendix is not code, it's an appendix, it's informational. we're looking at updating some things in there, mostly table 4 and others. So we'll be working on that this winter. But again, even though it's not code, we realize that changes in there will affect things. We'll still seek some public input, and input from the industry about what's going on before we make those changes. But that's the only thing right now that we're working on, is not the code per se, but component manuals and appendix stuff we have been working on. What code section should a county cite for a collapsed septic tank or a steel tank? Well, there's several sections that could be cited. Chapter 145, 245, deals with the failing private on-site wastewater system. So the usual ones we have there for, discharge to groundwater, discharge to the surface. So if you have something like that, I mean, you could cite that, the state statute for failing in there. And there's SPS sections that refer back to that, but you can cite that and just say, hey, you got a tank that's leaking into groundwater, it's a failure. Also under 383.51, there's some generic sections. I mean, there's several ones that if you pick apart, you can probably find something in there, depending on when it was issued, is not meeting the management plan or not meeting as designed or not meeting other criteria. But generally, 383.51, parent 1 and 2, covers it. POWTS, including POWTS existing prior to 2000, shall be maintained at times not to create a human health hazard. The argument could be made that if the tank's leaking, it's a human health hazard. It's not working as designed. And then the second part here is that when upon inspection of a POWTS, including POWTS prior to 2000, any part of the system found to be defective in conformance with applicable provisions, the installation modification plan or approvals shall be repaired, renovated, replaced, or removed. So that's the easiest one. If something don't work the way it's intended, that's the best section to say, hey, you got to fix it. It's not according to the plan, you got to fix it. Not according to the chapter, you got to fix it. Tank is meant to hold liquid, not leak, got to fix it. So that's probably the easiest one to cite there. And then the last slide we have is, of course, the end. So bunch of great topics that everybody submitted and we came through and answered a bunch of them here. If you have other topics that you'd like covered, feel free to, email myself or email Katie. Let us know if you got a topic or something that you want us to cover or some burning question that you have. Usually we can fit them in. We're always looking for ideas to cover. And this was great, actually responding to questions that you guys want to know. That helps us out, provide information to you. And then obviously if one person wants to know, I'm sure others would like to know that answer also. But anyway, great first POWTS chat of the year, and appreciate everybody showing up and paying attention for a while. So